Before you start creating valuable content, it's helpful to find out what content tactics exist online and what types of content are most effective. In this module, I'm going to provide a number of examples of companies creating valuable content using a variety of tactics. This will help you see which tactics work best for your situation, and you can use these ideas as a springboard to generating great content ideas. Identify appropriate channels and tactics for a given scenario. Second, recite the strengths and weaknesses of various content tactics. And finally, consider how various tactics might work for your organization.
And instead of sort of throwing these up like spaghetti and see what sticks on the wall, one of the things that I like to do is focus on some of the research that's come back in the last year or two that says not only what content marketers are using, okay, that's kind of interesting, but what's most effective for them. And that's true in whether you're looking at B2C or B2B. And so it turns out that I'm glad other people are doing the experiments. I'd much rather learn lessons from their experiment than having to try to explain to my own organization or clients what's happening with our experiments. But nevertheless, the net is when you get a lot of content marketers together, they have a lot of information to share about what works and what doesn't. So let's begin looking at some of the things that content marketers say work for them. Interestingly enough, whether you're talking to B2C or B2B marketers, the number one tactic at the top of everybody's list of being the most effective tactic that they use is not digital. It's ye old-fashioned face-to-face events. And it's like, whoa, time out. I thought we're the 21st century here. I thought everything had to be new and improved and like pixelated. And the answer is, yeah, we'll get into a lot of that stuff, and a lot of it works too. But you know what? Interestingly enough, there are a lot of people who want to get off the internet and into real-life situations, meet other people face-to-face, and share with them what they're working on, what they're passionate about, what problems they're struggling with. And one of the organizations that has harnessed that kind of desire to meet up is Meetup. And in fact, God bless them, they have members all over the world. They have them in thousands of cities. And interestingly enough, the most popular meetup groups that you'll find right across the country are meetups around parents and family issues, meetups around outdoors and adventure hiking, things like that, meetups around business issues. In fact, one of the fastest growing meetup groups are tech meetups. Now, you want to know what an organizer of one of these meetups' biggest nightmare is? Oh my God, who am I going to get to be a speaker at next month's meetup? And one of the things that many organizations have not really taken advantage of yet is, oh, we got people, they can talk about these issues, they're pretty passionate about them. I could put together a speaking tour at various meetup groups, and it would be like 45,000 of them later before I've run out of opportunities. It's like, whoa, yeah. So this may be a little out of the box, but one form of content that is under-leveraged by most content marketers is the spoken word. Now, the second most effective tactic is an oldie but goodie. It's been around for close to 20 years. Is e-newsletters. And it's like, pardon me, that's here? And the answer is, hey, if it works, yeah, it should be here. And you shouldn't dismiss it as, oh, no, you don't understand. That's the boring people down the hall I don't talk to very much. The real issue here is if you can get someone to subscribe to your list and get your newsletter, and you actually start thinking about the content in that newsletter, and it's not just desperately what the poor newsletter editor can scavenge together that month. It actually becomes something that begins to address some of the strategy that you put together earlier. It can move the needle. It can generate leads and sales. It's the part of the content marketing mix you really, really, really want to include. Now, Another one that seems to be underleveraged, and it mystifies me because I wrote the book YouTube and Video Marketing an Hour a Day, so maybe I'm biased. But it turns out, of all the marketers in B2B and B2C who've been surveyed, the third most effective tactic on their list is video, online video. And the example I've got here is a fellow, Austin Craig, who's from a little company called AuraBrush. They're based in Utah, and they make, and this is going to be hard to pronounce, a tongue cleaner. That's right, you scrape the gunk off your tongue because that's what causes bad breath. How do I know? I watched their YouTube video. That's what they explained to me. And the interesting backstory of how they got this is the founder of the company, Dr. Bob, who invented, believe it or not, the patented tongue cleaner called the AuraBrush, was having trouble selling it. Nobody wanted to stock his product in their stores. Nobody even wanted to buy the patent off of him. And in desperation, he went to a marketing class and said, please take my product, kick the tires, give me a plan, tell me what you think I ought to do. And the class was divided into different groups. One of the groups that took on his product came back to him and said, sir, we've done a little bit of market research. We've found that maybe, possibly on a good day, 7% of the people on the internet might actually buy something like this. But, you're old, you're 76. You should probably just retire. That was the advice. Well, one of the students in the back of the room, named Jeffrey Harmon, said, excuse me, 7% of the internet? That's huge. And Dr. Bob said, yeah, but, how would I reach them? And Jeff said, have you heard of YouTube? We could create a YouTube video and, let them know what your product does. So he said, after class, you talk to me. You tell me how to put this YouTube thing together. Jeffrey did. He got some friends of his to make a funny video. The funny video sold 1 million units of AuraBrush tongue cleaners at $7 a pop. And 18 months after launch, the company was a multi-million-dollar company. And then last year, they launched a whole new product line called Aura Pup. And this is not to clean bad breath in people, it's to clean bad breath in dogs. And they made another video. They did it all over again, proving that this is a formula that works, not just a one-off hit. And oh, by the way, they sold $2 million of Aura Pups in the first 9 months after launch, both of which leveraged YouTube video to introduce the product to the market and explain what it was good for. So yes, whether you're B2B, B2C, whatever, check out video. It ought to be part of your repertoire. Now, another one is case studies. Case studies have been around for 100 years. They still work. So don't blow them off because, oh, that's old. The answer is, if they're old and they work, keep doing them. One of the companies that does case studies really, really well is HubSpot. If you go to their site, you'll find case studies sliced and diced by industry vertical, by size of company, by you name it, they got it. And they leverage this to get new customers. So, case studies, it works. Do them. Another one is webinars and webcasts. By the way, Market Motive does a lot of these. Why? They work. Not everybody can get out of the office and go to a conference these days. Travel budgets being what they are, people are traveling a lot less than they used to. So guess what? If you've got some really interesting experts on your staff, put together a webinar or a webcast series. And you know what? It can help move people along that sales process too. So again, this is another form of content that you might not normally think of. But yeah, a webinar, that's content marketing. Interestingly now, for some people, the jury's still out on social media, other than blogs. Blogs I still give credit to. I think social media marketing needs to be tied into content marketing because it can be really, really effective. One of the companies that I've heard a case study from is Piper Aircraft. They took a brand new product called the Piper Sport, and trust me, a week before the launch of the product, the word didn't exist. So there was no search term traffic for Piper Sport, okay? They were coining a term and launching it. But it became a search term because that launch was so successful. And oh, by the way, because they were the only ones creating content around the term. They didn't just rank number one in the search listings. They ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 because they had their website, their Facebook page, their YouTube channel, their Twitter account, the interviews that they had set up with the press, the photos that they had taken, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what page one of search results were from a social media marketing campaign. Oh, by the way, they sold a plane within the first day. The plane cost $140,000. Oh, by the way, they sold 15 of those planes within the first 90 days. That's $2.1 million in sales. And that's before anything else had kicked in. In other words, social media marketing may be untested for your organization. They may not have had those kinds of results. Don't give up on it yet. You know, frankly, it can be a really, really effective tactic to be using. Now, as I mentioned, one of the great tactics out there is blogs. Yeah, they're, date back to maybe, 2003. Does that make them grandfathers yet? No, I don't think so. Blogs are incredibly effective if the content is focused on the kinds of issues that attract your target audience. If the content is all about me, here's the promotions that we had internally last week, and oh, by the way, here's our organization's new products, features, and benefits. Gone. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, this is a new blog that we created for an organization called the National Transfer Network. They are now attracting thousands of people a month. And it's not just thousands of people, it's thousands of their target audience, which would have been hard to find otherwise. These are the people who are in college admissions who are dealing with transfer students. How do you get those folks out of the woodwork? You create compelling information or content that they want to read. And then all of a sudden interacting with them is a heck of a lot easier. Another tactic that I strongly recommend that you use are research reports. And I have to confess, in the old days, doing research was expensive and time-consuming, and you probably had to work for a really big organization to do the kind of research that anyone would pay attention to. Heaven forbid, even research that was accurate. Well, these days, a number of organizations can offer you inexpensive and accurate ways to do research. The one I happen to like is Google Consumer Surveys. Yep, that's right, Google. They're in the consumer survey business now too. And by the way, their research was so accurate that it was one of 2 research organizations in the country that accurately predicted the outcome of the 2012 presidential election in all 50 states. Not bad for a newcomer. And for me, I was using it for a client to try to get a target audience. I wanted 1,000 responses. I got results within 48 hours. It only cost me $2,000. And the responses just didn't come back as a data dump. It wasn't just raw data. They came back in charts. And one of the interesting things that Google Consumer Surveys did was it spotted a couple of anomalies. It did some crosstabs that I hadn't actually asked for. But it said, you know what, if you look at the data, interestingly enough, there's this one segment here that acts differently than the others. You might want to sort of check them out. All of that came back quickly, accurately, and inexpensively. So putting together the research report was like I was able to turn it around within days, not months. And so I think that makes research reports something that you may want to take a second look at. If you've thought about them in the past and given up on them, now's the time to check them out again. Another tack that I think all of us have used from time to time is white papers. Guess what? They haven't stopped working. They are still really good B2B marketing tactics. For some reason, it gives the credibility that if you've done a white paper on a topic that you need to not only build your own authority and reputation in a field, but also to move your prospect farther down that sales journey. So again, just because they've been around for a while, don't blow them off. White papers still work. Now, a tactic that all of us have been using probably since the web hit is putting articles on your website. Unfortunately, somewhere along the way, the people who took control of the website tended to be more technical than they were content creators. And so a lot of the content on most websites is actually fairly thin. Why? Because it's being put there by people who are really, really wizards at using content management systems and not so much at writing compelling content. Well, guess what? Ever since the Google Panda update, that role has reversed, and somehow or other the content marketing people need to own that. Sometimes you're going to have to negotiate your way for it, but it is a great tactic. If the articles you are creating meet the guidelines of what Google says it's looking for. And by the way, they've spelled it out. They're all here on this list. And if you just scan down the list, this is not something that a techie can crank out. This is something that a wordsmith needs to worry about. Someone who's going to worry about making useful information in detail that is original. Pardon me, this is definitely why content marketing needs to have at least an impact, if not responsibility for the kind of articles that are posted on your website. If you do that, then all of a sudden your SEO efforts will come alive. If you leave it to the automated systems that are doing thin content, guess what? That stuff stopped working. Another form of content, and this is sort of a plug for Market Motive, but hey, we walk and talk the game too, are ebooks. And you would think that, oh, wow, ebooks, that's going to take a lot of time. I don't have the kind of staff. Well, let me tell you what Market Motive did. They took the faculty here, 8 of us, and they said, could each one of you answer these questions? Well, yeah, I got time for that. And then they assembled the answers to those questions in an ebook. And guess what? This ebook is targeted for managers, but if you're a manager in your organization, you may want to download it. It is free. It is useful information. And I can tell you, as one of the contributors to this, it didn't take all that much of my time to actually contribute my small part of it. But in conjunction with my colleagues, we actually created something that I would read and share. So again, if you haven't thought about ebooks, take a second look at that one. Another tactic that you're going to want to consider is creating mobile content. Now, as many people are visiting the internet from mobile devices as are visiting it now from desktop devices. So in some cases, the mobile smartphone has become the first screen. And so increasingly organizations are trying to think about, well, what kind of content do I create there? Particularly if what I really want to do is drive traffic to my website, because that's where I'm going to monetize it. And the answer is, well, check out what USA Today is doing. They're using Instagram. They put a camera on a drone, flew it over a recent wildfire in the state of Washington to get photo coverage that, a photographer on foot couldn't go get. A video crew couldn't get their truck anywhere near the area. But guess what? Wedding videographers, virtually all of them that I've met, have already figured out how to put a camera on a drone, even for weddings. So it is not hard to put this kind of thing together. What they did with the video, though, is it didn't say, hey, Ma, look at me. This is a teaser. This is a product teaser. This is a story that will appear tomorrow on usatoday.com or in the print edition. And we're going to give you a quick sneak preview in this 15 seconds today. Well, that's a brilliant tactic. That's one that you're going to want to borrow and think about for your own organization, because it works. Another tactic that I really strongly encourage you to think about is online presentations. Now, they've been around for years too. But guess what? Most of us are dumping really boring PowerPoint slides into SlideShare and thinking, well, I did that, it didn't quite work. Well, guess what? There are ways to take your online presentation and have it come alive. There's an organization out there. If you go to onlinepresentations.com, you can find a free app that will allow you to add YouTube video to your PowerPoint presentation, so that when you're putting something online, it actually harnesses the power of video. And who knows, if the rest of your PowerPoint isn't boring, Maybe that'll help. But it really takes some time and effort to think about what you put online, because that's content too, and it needs to meet the strategy that you put together earlier if you really want it to work. Another tactic that has really come out of left field over the last year or two is infographics. It's one of the fastest growing tactics that we've seen in B2B or B2C. And unfortunately, because it is so fast growing, there are lots and lots and lots of people now doing infographics. And so it's no longer enough just to do one and to be different, because you're not so different. Now you're going to have to create really compelling infographics. In other words, quality content still matters, even if it's in a new format. So yes, please jump on the bandwagon. Please start using infographics, but do not get by, or do not try to get by with run-of-the-mill stuff, because you know what? That doesn't work anymore. There's a lot of ways you can make it far more interesting so that the infographic tells your story. And I know, press releases, aren't they dead yet? I mean, seriously? And the answer is no, they're not dead yet. In fact, they are really capable of coming alive if the content comes alive. And the reason why press releases, I think, are dying off is because way too many people in the legal department are killing them. They say nothing, so if there's no good content in there, if all it is the approved stuff, give me a break. Nobody's interested in that. But we did a test with a small business in New Orleans. We created 3 different press releases for some of their customers. One of them was a boutique. One of them was a restaurant. One of them was a jewelry shop. Pretty normal, run-of-the-mill kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, we launched these press releases in the weeks leading up to Mardi Gras and the Super Bowl. And oh my God, talk about clutter, talk about confusion. How could a small business stand out in that kind of world? But what we did with these 3 releases is we made them a test. One of the releases had no multimedia whatsoever. The second release had just a photo, and the third release had a video inserted into the release. And what we discovered is that the video release got more people to read it and more people to click on the links to go visit the store. And oh, by the way, the item in the video, it sold out. So yeah, even the old lowly press release can be compelling content if you allow the content to be compelling. Don't water it down. Don't hose it down. Do not take all the life out of it. Tell a good story. And guess what? You can generate results. That's a lot of content. That's a lot of content types. Those are a lot of content tactics. How would you assemble this? Well, what I would strongly recommend is that you put together an editorial calendar. Because when you start laying this out across the year, what you discover is, I can do 1 of these a month, I can do 2 of these a week, I can do, you know what? All of a sudden, your content marketing doesn't seem so onerous because you've got a plan. And by the way, you have different kinds of content. Some of that content needs to be evergreen. Some of that content needs to be timed around a specific event. And some of the content can just be out of left field when something unexpected happens. And you know what? That's okay too. So build your editorial calendar and feel free to make adjustments to it. Everyone in the news business does, and everyone in the content marketing business needs to learn this trick too. So this whole module was about answering the question, if you use a larger number of tactics, are you more likely to be an effective content marketer? And I think the real answer here is that more is not better, but if you use more intelligently to tell the right kind of stories in a lot of different places, then yeah, it can help you be a more effective content marketer.
One of the content marketing tactics that B2B marketers seem more reluctant to use is video. However, video can be incredibly effective, particularly because there's been some very interesting shifts in B2B content marketing over the past few years. As everyone knows, the business-to-business marketplace is changing. Now, that may not come as a surprise, but the way things are evolving might serve as a wake-up call for some brands. That's because over the past few years, there have been some rather interesting shifts, not just in how B2B buying decisions are made, but also in who is responsible for making them. Now, one B2B marketer, Caterpillar, recognized that nearly half of all the people who were conducting B2B research for their category of product were millennials. In other words, they were 18 to 34 years old. And that was a huge shift. Just a couple of years earlier, millennials only represented about 27% of the people who were investigating whether or not to buy their kind of product. But recently, much more recently, that has shifted to 46%. In other words, what a lot of us may be missing is a lot of those millennials are growing up. They are moving into mid-management level positions. They are now in their 30s, and they're making buying decisions. And what's interesting is although they are now in mid-level decisions, they are still bringing with them some things that they learned to use over the past 10 years. One of those is watching video. So one of the things that Caterpillar recognized is that if they wanted to engage this audience, if they wanted to make sure that their brand was being considered at key moments in the purchase decision process, they needed to, tailor content for them. That's why they created a video campaign that included 4 videos that was called the Build for It campaign. Now, what Caterpillar also saw was that researchers were making buying decisions and definitely influencing buying decisions even if they weren't members of the so-called C-suite. That's the CEO, the CMO, the CFO, all the C-level executives in an organization. And what they found was that yes, particularly in a business-to-business purchase of a large amount of money, the C-suite often was the final authority. But many times this final authority meant signing off on a recommendation that was made by a younger influencer who had done the research, checked out the alternatives, and in 81% of the situations, ended up having a say in what got bought. So Caterpillar anecdotally discovered that there were some new engineers who were coming on board and just going online and placing orders without even running it past the C-suite. So whether they wanted to target the 24% of the final authority who weren't in the C-suite, or the 81% of the people who were influencing what the C-suite would consider and end up purchasing, they needed to get beyond the myth that the only people they needed to target were C-level executives. They also discovered that about 71% of B2B researchers would start their search with a generic search term. In other words, they weren't branded. They were looking for solutions to a problem. And these researchers often would conduct up to 12 different searches before they even began to engage with a particular vendor's website. And so one of the things they realized is that having a brand name that your father knew, or the baby boomer who is a top level executive today doesn't help you if a new generation comes along who isn't as connected with those old traditional brands. They needed to change their marketing tactics. They needed to get found in some of those generic searches so that they would be part of a consideration set. Another thing they discovered was that B2B researchers were using their smartphone throughout the entire path to purchase. They were using it to get inspiration. They were doing research on their smartphone. They were actually making purchases over their smartphone, and they were getting post-purchase help on a smartphone. And that was a surprise. Nevertheless, this group of people is large and growing. In a lot of cases, they are using their smartphone even when they're at the office and have a desktop computer available. So again, another thing that Caterpillar learned in this process. Last but not least, Caterpillar discovered that B2B researchers were watching video. As I mentioned, about 70% of the B2B buyers and researchers were watching videos, and they were doing it throughout the path to purchase. And it wasn't just light viewing. Nearly half of these researchers were watching more than 30 minutes of video. And the video they were watching was B2B related. And it was part of their research process. In other words, they were looking for information on product features, how-to videos, and professional reviews. And 20% of them were spending more than 60 minutes watching video. So if you're in the B2B marketing game and video is not one of the content marketing tactics that you're currently using, you are totally missing out on this opportunity. So what kind of video do you create then to engage this new B2B audience? Well, as I mentioned, Caterpillar created a campaign. It included 4 new videos. The name of the campaign is Built For It. You can find it on YouTube if you look. One of the interesting things is that one of these videos, which is called Stack, has over 3.4 million views. Again, pretty amazing. But what it is it's a product demo. It shows 5 of Caterpillar's, heavy pieces of equipment working together to basically stack a lot of blocks, some very heavy ones, in a way that sort of looks like a Jenga game. In fact, it's a pretty snappy soundtrack that goes with it. It's something that I think you'll want to watch. But again, from Caterpillar's point of view, they took this different kind of approach because they understood that the traditional purchasing methodology through the typical salesperson's relationship to the C-suite was being displaced by a new process that was now happening online. And as Renee Richardson, Caterpillar's global marketing services manager, said, the point of contact with sales comes a lot later. So we have to be well prepared to present our value story to our customers or potential customers much earlier and articulate it in a much simpler manner. That's a good lesson for all of us to learn from. There are more than a dozen key takeaways from this module, just as there are more than a dozen key tactics that you can use in content marketing. So first, online video can demonstrate your products quickly and effectively. Case studies can provide proof of success. They can give examples of product effectiveness. They can also provide success stories for many different types of customers. Webinars and webcasts can enable companies to reach a live audience without travel expenses. Social media marketing should be integrated with content marketing, and having social channels on various domains can help you own the search engine result pages for your branded terms. Blogs can attract prospects when the content reflects the interests and needs of your most valuable prospects. Research can provide insight into how consumers will perceive your message, and newer research tools have made consumer research a whole lot simpler and a whole lot more affordable. White papers can add authority to your business and move prospects through your funnel. White papers are particularly valuable as a B2B content tactic. Online presentations can be effective as long as the content is compelling and engaging. An editorial calendar can help ensure that you publish all of your content consistently, and this provides a clearer idea of how you can spread your content out over time.